Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Lees. Here's tonight's top story. Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai reappears, but concerns over her health and safety remain. Peng vanished at the start of the month after alleging that a top Chinese official coerced her into sex.
In the past, we have seen various similar cases where people had no option but to say what they had been told to.
Also tonight, new analysis reveals the number of vulnerable children being put in care could reach 100,000 in 5 years. The cost would swallow 60% of local councils' children and family budget. And the Prime Minister announces that all new homes built in England will require an electric vehicle charging point. Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai had a video call with the International Olympic Committee on the weekend and appeared at some public events. But both the human rights group Amnesty International and the Women's Tennis Association are not convinced about her freedom and safety. Peng had not been seen or heard from publicly since early November after she alleged that a top Chinese official had coerced her into sex. NTD's Anna Rodriguez has the story.
The International Olympic Committee said on Sunday that its president Thomas Bach had spoken to Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai for 30 minutes and that Peng had said she was safe and well. The whereabouts of Peng became a matter of international concern 3 weeks ago after she alleged that China's former Vice Premier Zhang Gaoli had sexually assaulted her. The IOC said in a statement that Peng had expressed that she would like to have her privacy respected at this time and prefers to spend her time with friends and family. Amnesty International's China researcher Arkan Akkad said the IOC was entering dangerous waters with this video call.
They should be extremely careful not to participate in any whitewash of possible human rights violations. In the past, we have seen various similar cases where people had no option but to say what they had been told to.
Akkad said the state-run media outlets in China have a track record of fabricating statements and forcing people to make televised testimonies.
The call between the IOC and Peng Shuai is hardly convincing that Peng Shuai has full and genuine freedom of expression, liberty, security, and movement.
Also on Sunday, according to footage published by a reporter from a state-run media outlet, Peng attended some public events. But concerns over Peng's health and safety still remain. In the footage, Peng can be seen among guests signing oversized tennis balls for children at a tennis tournament organized by China Open in Beijing. The footage can't be independently verified. Another video reportedly shows Peng at a Beijing restaurant. World tennis bodies have remained unconvinced. In a statement, Women's Tennis Association Chairman Steve Simon said, "While it is positive to see her, it remains unclear if she is free and able to make decisions and take actions on her own without coercion or external interference. This video alone is insufficient." The WTA had earlier threatened to pull tournaments out of China over Peng's situation. The former doubles world number one had not been seen or heard from publicly since she alleged on Chinese social media on November the 2nd that Zhang had coerced her into sex and they later had an on and off consensual relationship. Anna Rodriguez, NTD News.
On Tuesday, MPs are set to debate legislation that aims to curb forced organ harvesting in China. It's dubbed the Squid Game Amendment because of the Netflix show's gruesome organ harvesting scene in which people are kept alive so their organs could be sold. Labour MP Mary Rimmer, who tabled the amendment, tells NTD that it's the greatest crime against humanity in the 21st century, and the UK should step up to stop it.
I'm here with Labour Member of Parliament Mary Rimmer, who's putting forward legislation that aims to put a dent into China's forced organ harvesting trade. So can you tell me with this amendment what will happen if it passes?
Well, as we know, Chinese organ harvesting is the greatest crime against humanity of the 21st century. And what this will do, it will force people to look to go to a country with an ethical organ donation scheme, should they wish to go to a country out of this country for an organ. China would have to set up an ethical one. At the present time, World Health Organization assessment is not independent. It is a self-assessment. So in fact, the countries assess themselves as having an ethical organ donation scheme, and it is simply not.
The China Tribunal ruled in 2019 that forced organ harvesting has happened in China on a substantial scale, with its main source of organs likely coming from practitioners of Falun Gong, a spiritual practice which has been suppressed in China since 1999. And it found evidence of mass medical testing of the Uyghurs, which means they could be used by the Chinese regime as an organ bank. Mary Rimmer's amendment would ban UK citizens from receiving a transplant abroad without the clear consent of the donor, or if the donor is not able to give it, consent from the donor's next of kin. In addition, it would require imported cadavers or corpses to have the same consent as those from within the UK. This follows reports that a Real Bodies exhibition in Birmingham could have displayed the bodies of Chinese political prisoners. In terms of the people affected by this organ harvesting, who are the victims of this crime?
The main source of the organs to these criminals has been the Falun Gong, and pretty much weighing down now. And there is evidence now that the Uyghurs is actually enough to form an organ bank of organs. So we know that. And the Uyghur Tribunal, I think, is coming to a close pretty soon and will be released. So there'll be evidence there. What people must understand is each body that we've seen up to now, or what is evidence, has been average age of 28 years healthy. And each body has been worth between $500,000 and $750,000 US. That's what the organs are worth. So it's big money, this business. It's big money. And where there's big money, there are criminals. And simply, governments have got to stand up to these criminals, and we must stop this scheme.
And this amendment's been dubbed the Squid Game amendment. Why is that?
Squid Games, you can watch it on Netflix if you've got the guts or the courage to do that. It's a South Korean programme, and it's where they actually show where these organs are being removed from bodies. It's quite churlish. Quite frankly, I couldn't watch it myself. But it's also showing this going on to hundreds of thousands of people. Perhaps more people should see it, and it's hard to believe, but we've got to step it up. We've got to stop this. We have a duty. Where there's a human right, and surely there's a human right to practice a faith or not practice a faith, then we all have a duty to ensure that happens. And dear God, to take people's organs. And who would want to be the recipient of such an organ if they knew what was happening, what the crime was? Who would want it?
The amendment is due to be debated on Tuesday afternoon and has support across the political parties. Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
A new analysis reveals the number of vulnerable children being placed in council care in England could reach almost 100,000 by the middle of the decade. According to the research commissioned by the County Councils Network, too many vulnerable children are being placed in expensive residential care settings due to an insufficient number of alternatives, such as foster carers. The report said the number of children in care could rise to 95,000 by 2025, up from 69,000 in 2015, a 36% increase over 10 years. This could mean councils' spend on children in care rises from less than £4 billion in 2015 to more than £7 billion in 2025, 60% of their children and family budget. The research found residential care is the most expensive form of care. The cost of putting a child in a children's home was over £4,000 a week in 2020, over £1,000 more expensive than in 2014. This comes as the child protection charity NSPCC said it receives nearly 5,000 calls about child sexual abuse or exploitation over the 6 months to October, up 36% compared with the same period last year. Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced today that starting from next year, new homes built in England will be required to have an electric vehicle charging point. The government says the move will see 145,000 new charging points installed each year. The regulation comes in the run-up to 2030, when the sale of new petrol and diesel cars will end in the UK. NTD's Malcolm Hudson has more on this.
All new homes, supermarkets and workplaces will be required to have electric vehicle charging points following a new law the Prime Minister announced on Monday.
We're regulating so as to require new homes and buildings to have EV charging points, with another 145,000 charging points to be installed thanks to these regulations.
Johnson spoke at the Confederation of British Industries conference. At the moment, the UK has about 25,000 charging points. This boost to the charging point rollout is supposed to pave the way for the ban on petrol and diesel car sales in 2030, when new infrastructure will be needed for electric vehicles. Johnson said that when he was Mayor of London, EV charging points were not yet a success.
But 10 years after that, the tipping point has come, hasn't it? UK sales of EVs are now increasing at 70% a year. And in 2030, we're ending the market for new hydrocarbon ICEs, internal combustion engine vehicles, ahead of other European countries. And our companies are responding.
Parliament will debate these changes to building regulations next month, and they are set to come into force in the middle of next year. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
Police arrested 124 climate activists on Saturday after a sit-down protest closed Lambeth Bridge in central London. The demonstration was held in support of 9 climate activists who were jailed last week for defying an injunction of road blockades. Around 250 people took part in the protest, blocking the road on Saturday. Insulate Britain said it was not involved in organising it. Police were called at around 2 in the afternoon, and the bridge was finally reopened at 7 p.m. In other news, a crowd of protesters gathered outside London's Austrian embassy on Saturday night as opposition to European COVID restrictions intensifies. People voiced their support for those in Austria who today entered Western Europe's first post-vaccine lockdown. Last week, Austrian Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg said Austria's 9 million citizens would be placed in lockdown from Monday, and that vaccination will become mandatory across the nation from the 1st of February. A similar protest was held at the Austrian embassy in Paris on Thursday. Christie's auction house has a special collection of high-end handbags and accessories going under the hammer tomorrow. The auction includes a limited edition Hermes bag expected to sell for over £100,000, as well as Louis Vuitton and Chanel. Now, it's rare to see such a varied collection of high-end handbags up for sale.
A wide range of designer handbags are going under the hammer at Christie's, with some expected to fetch more than £100,000. Handbags Online, the London edit, is open until Tuesday for bidding on handbags, luggage and accessories.
It's very unusual to see that many bags at the same time, because obviously whenever you go to the shop you will not be able to see that many models and colors, and it's very interesting to kind of see all the colors, all the models and all the sizes in the same place.
Highlights include a colourful collection by French luxury goods maker Hermes, known for its high-end Birkin and Kelly ranges. Leading the lot is a white and orange Birkin Faubourg Cellier 20 bag, depicting the front of Hermes' flagship store in Paris.
For me, I was very happy to get the white Faubourg, which is right here, because we sold the blue and the brown in the past, and that was the first time we had the white one, and it was also the first time I was seeing it in person.
Released this year as limited edition, this bag is priced between £80,000 and £100,000. Other Hermes bags include chevron motif Bog Oak Caliwood 22, which is expected to reach £80,000. And this shiny Cocoa Porosus Crocodile Birkin 35, adorned with 18-carat yellow gold and yellow sapphire hardware, valued at £70,000.
Most of our clients are using the bags because they are made to be used. They are handbags.
Other lots include Louis Vuitton and Chanel luggage and accessories, ranging from £6,000 to £40,000.
Still to come, tens of thousands of people protested in Vienna on Saturday against COVID restrictions, a day after Austria's government announced a new lockdown on compulsory vaccines. We hear directly from them. That and more after the break. Over 40,000 protesters took to the streets of Vienna on Saturday over COVID-19 restrictions. They were rallying against the government imposing a new lockdown this week and Europe's first vaccination mandate from next year. Our sister media, the Epoch Times, was there to find out what people had to say. Here's NTD's Eddie Aiken with more.
On Monday, Austria became the first country in Western Europe to reimpose a lockdown since COVID-19 vaccines were rolled out. Officials say it's necessary to bring down the number of new daily infections and the number of virus patients in intensive care. The government has also announced it will make it compulsory to get inoculated as of February, the first COVID-19 vaccine mandate in Europe. Around 66% of the population are vaccinated. On Saturday, over 40,000 people in Vienna came out to protest against the return of severe restrictions and the mandate.
The government should stop all measures and let us go about our lives as normal as we always have. We went through flu epidemics. Yes, that's just the way it was. The hospitals were full, and when winter was over, they were empty again. I'm not against targeted vaccination of risk groups. People should do that if they want to. But I think it's crazy how the pandemic has been dragged down to all age groups, even though people are statistically not affected.
I feel that we just need to have a referendum with the population, talk about it, and come with a common solution. I don't know which solution we can come up with, but just imposing and coming up with laws that tell you that you have to be vaccinated is not enough.
There is the tendency of kind of a hate speech against people who are not vaccinated, which doesn't have any ground medically or scientifically. So I think it's a very, very serious and alarming development.
I'm in favour of rethinking our system altogether. We live in a sham democracy where we're allowed to make a choice every 5 years, and then the ladies and gentlemen in government do what they want.
I stand up for our basic and human rights because we are still human beings, whether vaccinated or unvaccinated.
So, if a lot of people in Austria take to the streets, protest, boycott, stop working, then Germany will think very carefully about whether it goes down that path. I think it's a kind of test that you start now with the smaller country, see if you can enforce it, and if it fails in Austria, it will fail in many other countries in Europe.
The Austrian government says the renewed lockdown will be in place for at least 10 days, but restrictions will remain for the unvaccinated beyond that. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
Not only Austria saw demonstrations over the weekend, protests against COVID restrictions took place in several European capitals. Some governments are planning to make vaccinations mandatory for health workers, while others want to ban unvaccinated people from entering public buildings. Protesters say the restrictions are discriminatory and are sowing conflict. NTD's El Rose has the story.
Protesters took to the streets in several European countries on the weekend to demonstrate against COVID-19-related restrictions and vaccine mandates. Governments in Europe started to ramp restrictions in recent days in response to what they say is a surge of new cases. In the Netherlands, hundreds of people marched through the streets of Amsterdam on Saturday. The country is now in a 3-week partial lockdown with a curfew for hospitality venues. The Dutch government also plans to exclude those with a negative test result from the country's vaccine passport.
This policy makes a lot of conflicts between the people. It makes a lot of war on the micro and the macro level.
Another protester said the riots in Rotterdam has nothing to do with them. Protests in the Dutch city turned violent on several nights, with police opening fire at rioters on Friday.
We are peaceful, and the organisers here in Amsterdam have shown that to be peaceful as well over the months. And it's an absolute shame what happened in Rotterdam last night.
About 35,000 people took part in a demonstration in central Brussels on Sunday.
Yeah, basically because we want our freedom, and being injected by something that's not tested well, being not able to work where you want to work, to be where you want to be, that's not what we stand for.
Belgium tightened its coronavirus restrictions on Wednesday. It requires people to use face masks in places such as restaurants, where they are already required to show a COVID pass.
You know, it's discrimination. People get discriminated because the QR code, you know. People are vaccinated, cannot enter some buildings because they only had one vaccine.
The Belgian government plans to make vaccinations compulsory for health workers. In Croatia, around 15,000 people demonstrated in the capital Zagreb on Saturday. From Monday, only people with COVID passports can enter government and public buildings in the country.
I came to support all the people who oppose COVID passports because it is actually a measure that divides us into citizens and non-citizens, and it leads to great discrimination, even towards totalitarianism.
In Italy, thousands of people gathered in central Rome to demonstrate against green pass certificates required at workplaces, on public transport and other venues. And on Saturday evening, hundreds of people marched in the North Macedonian capital, Skopje, to protest against the government's plan to make vaccinations compulsory for health workers and other government employees. Earl Rhodes, NTD News.
The Belgian Prime Minister condemned the violence that occurred in Brussels on Sunday. Tens of thousands of people gathered at a march against COVID-19 restrictions imposed by the government. While speaking at a press conference on Monday, the Prime Minister said any attempt to attack police is unacceptable. NTD's Malcolm Hudson brings us this report.
Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo condemned the violence that broke out between demonstrators and police in Brussels on Sunday.
It is unacceptable that this violence targeted police forces. This violence is even more unacceptable because of the moment we are living.
De Croo said everything will be done to find and charge those who committed violent acts. Around 35,000 people took to the streets in the Belgian capital to protest against restrictions reimposed by the government. Belgian media said some threw smoke bombs and fireworks. Clashes continued into the evening, but the situation normalized later, police said. Belgium tightened its coronavirus restrictions on Wednesday. This included mandating wider use of masks and enforcing working from home, as cases rose in the country's fourth wave. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
Going to France, armies throughout the 20th century have used psychological warfare as one of the ways to break their enemies' morale. Now, a French military officer who worked in intelligence services says the government is also using psychological warfare to promote COVID-19 vaccines in France. NTD's France correspondent David Vives interviewed him.
France has reported over 20,000 CCP virus cases on Wednesday and Thursday. French President Emmanuel Macron is considering new measures in response. One of them is locking down unvaccinated people. A recent poll by Ilabe BFM TV says 6 out of 10 French citizens agree with it. But French Army Captain Alexandre Juvin-Brunet says if it were to be applied, the country might be even more divided.
Never has our country been so divided between vaccinated and unvaccinated people.
Juvin-Brunet created an association to inform people on their rights. It now has 5,000 followers. He says the government uses the same methods to promote the COVID-19 vaccine as the French Army Intelligence Services did in psychological warfare.
A vaccine mandate is illegal and against the Constitution, so they are forced to do it this way. Psychological warfare, or the manufacturing of consent, is using methods such as inducing people to get the vaccine with a vaccine pass. This would ban people from going to certain places such as restaurants, entertainment venues, hospitals, or even from riding on trains.
Though around 70% of the nation is fully vaccinated, French media outlets are warning against a fifth wave of the pandemic. Jevin Brunet says this causes misunderstanding. People will question the vaccine's efficacy and the restrictive measures put in place.
There are different methods in psychological warfare, such as making people scared or telling them different information that contradict with each other. If you're not getting the vaccine, some things are taken away from you, such as your liberties. We give you something, we take it back. So this creates a mental state where you are dependent and vulnerable.
The captain also says that the French military and the US military used these methods in the 20th century. And later on, companies also applied the same tactics in their commercials.
In this warfare, you win the battle when people comply with your decision and when their mental well-being is destroyed.
Some authors have called this psychological warfare the manufacturing of consent. Jevin Brunet says the government and the vaccine makers now use it to promote the vaccine. David Vives, NTD News.
The Champs-Élysées Avenue in Paris was lit up in red for the Christmas season on Sunday. French pop star Clara Luciani switched on the lights alongside Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo and other top officials. Hundreds gathered to watch the event taking place on one of the world's most famous streets. The French call Champs-Élysées the most beautiful avenue in the world. It spreads over a mile and is lined with shops and restaurants. At the top stands the Arc de Triomphe, a landmark monument of the French capital. It comes in stark contrast to last year's event, which was live-streamed over the internet. National lockdowns prevented the public from attending in person. That's the news for today. Have a good evening.